I am going to redo one of my very old videos today. I did the original more than 5 years ago, and I'm doing it for a couple of reasons. One is I want to modernize it and make it high definition, put in the metric equivalents, but Christmas will be 2 weeks away when I upload this to YouTube. So what I want to do is the recipe from my mom's Italian Christmas cookies. They are Italian. I've done some research on that. My mother's mother was from Naples, so my mother learned it from her mother. I sort of learned it from my mother. The problem was my mother wouldn't use butter or oil in her Christmas cookies. And after about 4 or 5 days, they would dry out and be hard as rocks. My brother and I still joke about Mom's Christmas cookies. We tell people we weren't allowed to throw them in the house. The dog liked them. Scrape the frosting off the top, give it to the dog. It's like munching on a sweet bone. The dog enjoyed them. I fixed my mom's recipe. I'm going to be using butter, some heavy cream. These cookies will hold their texture a lot longer than my mom's cookies did. So let's make my mom's Italian Christmas cookies. I have here about 4.5 cups, 22 ounces or 624 grams by weight of all-purpose flour. And then I have here 3/4 of a cup, 6 ounces, 170 grams of butter. This is whole butter, and this is at room temperature. Took these out of the refrigerator. Took this out of the refrigerator last night. And I have a pastry cutter here, and I'm going to use this to kind of cut the two together. I've broken this up now pretty well with my pastry cutter. Another thing you can do is you can get in there with your hands and kind of just press it a little bit to force the butter and flour together. Don't do it too much because the warmth of your hand could melt that butter and turn it into kind of an oil. You don't want to get it oily. So now I've got some lumps here. Go back with my pastry cutter and just break those up. Next, I'm going to add 1/2 cup, which is 3.5 ounces by weight, or 100 grams of granulated sugar. And then I'm going to put in there about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. If you're using unsalted butter, you can increase this to 3/4 teaspoon to 1 teaspoon. I'm using whole butter with salt in it because the butter doesn't have a lot of salt in it. I've tried Kerrygold butter, Irish butter, a lot of salt. But the butter I use is fine. And then this is 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And then using my pastry cutter, I'm going to blend this all together again. All right, that looks pretty good there. Going to move that to the side. Take out a smaller bowl. Now in here, I'm going to combine 4 eggs. These are large eggs. And then what I have here is 1/2 cup, or about 120 milliliters of heavy cream. This is going to add some more fat to my cookies, along with the butter. And I'm going to blend this well. All right, that looks good. Now, for flavoring, I'm going to be using anise extract. You can use vanilla if you want. You could use hazelnut if you wanted to, or almond. Anise is, I believe, it is the traditional flavoring. And I'm going to be adding 2 teaspoons of anise flavoring to this mixture. I'm going to open a second bottle, which I have. And there's 2nd teaspoon. Okay, I'm going to blend this together. That looks good. So there are my wet ingredients. Now I'm going to combine the wet ingredients with the dry ingredients. Get that all in there. This is not going to blend completely with a spatula. I'm going to have to knead this. But I'll get this started. And one recipe that I looked at said to let this sit for 5 minutes before kneading. I don't know why. Maybe the flour has to absorb some of the moisture, but I'm going to do that. Okay, I've been kind of cutting that together with the spatula. You can see that's not much of a dough right now, but it will be in a moment. So I'll let that sit for 5 minutes. That'll give me an excuse to go check my email. All right, I'm ready to start kneading this now. The only thing in my email was one of those phishing things. You've won a $50 Amazon gift card. Someone from Russia telling me that. Yeah, right. I used to get those emails where they'd say, I'm in Russia and I have to transfer $200 million from my Russian bank account into an American bank account, which I don't have. Send me your bank information, including your PIN, and I'll transfer the money into your account, and then you can have half of it. I would write back and say, I got a better idea. You send me all your bank information, I'll transfer the money, and you can have all of it. That's the kind of nice guy that I am. Yeah, they would never write back. Okay, I'm going to knead this until it's smooth. It's going to take a minute or two. It's a bit sticky right now. I might have to add a little bit more flour, but usually I don't. This is looking good. This took less than a minute. You don't need to knead this a lot like you do in making bread dough. I'm not trying to build up gluten chains, but you can see it's not sticky. That came together. I didn't have to add any more flour. Now we're ready to have some fun. But I need to prepare a couple of baking sheets. All right, here's where the fun begins. And you can do this with your children because this is like playing with modeling clay. When I was a child, we would do this. Mom would let us do this part. Okay, roll it into a pencil. You can bring the two ends onto itself and make a little bow. That's one idea. Another one, kind of simple. Pinch some of that off. And then just do a simple crossover. Something like that. Keep going. These were the shapes that we used to make as children. But I've thought of some others too. Okay, this one is sort of like that one, but go in opposite directions. So it's like that. That shape. Some more. Same thing as that. But then flip it over and bake it that way so it goes over the top. Okay, we're going to do this one again. Opposite directions. But then again, flip it over so it's a slightly different look. Like that. Okay, going a little bit longer. I'm going to do something on that idea. A little bit longer pencil. Curl it over, but then twist it once. So you get that. See if I can keep these where they're visible. That's a jet going overhead. I do live near the airport. Pinch it together and then do a double twist like that. That's a loud jet. So you get that shape with a loop on either end. Some other ideas that I came up with. do a really long one like that, and then curl it onto itself like that, so that you have a spiral. Another really simple one, just make a ring like that. We're going to advance on that. Make a ring like so, and take a little piece of dough and make a little ball and put it in the center. And following that little ball, you can just make a simple ball. I'm running out of room here. All right, one more, and then I'm going to move these over to my baking sheet. Another kind of long one. Doing sort of like that, but a little bit different. Go back and forth to make a squiggle like that. And you can come up with a lot of these different ideas. Let your kids play. That's what we would do. We would just do fun shapes, any ideas that we could think of. It's a fun thing to do with your children. As I do one more here, I want to tell you that I'm heating my oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 190 degrees Celsius. So there's my first batch, and I've got a lot of dough left over. This will make several dozen cookies. I'm going to bake these, as I said, in a 375 degree, 190 degrees Celsius oven for 15 minutes. They don't need to be browned. They actually traditionally are supposed to look white. So these would just be cooked through and just maybe slightly browned on the bottom after 15 minutes. Here's my first batch out of the oven. You can see they just got a little bit of browning underneath, hardly any browning. That's good. I'm going to move this to the side. And then I'm going to start transferring my cookies here to a cooling rack. So there are my cookies. I got 6.5 dozen out of that batch of dough that I made. These, by the way, are not very sweet. I only used half a cup of sugar. What was that, 100 grams? So these aren't going to have a lot of sweetness. Where they're going to get their sweetness is from the frosting. And that's what I'm going to make next. To make my frosting, I have here 1 1/3 cups, or 170 grams of confectioner's sugar, powdered sugar, into which I'm going to put 1 tablespoon of light corn syrup, and then what I have here is 2 tablespoons of water. You can use lemon juice. I've done that before. It makes a nice frosting. I'm going to put about half that in there initially and stir that in. I want a frosting that's slightly runny. I don't want it to be like the frosting you use on a cake. So if I need to add more water, I can. It's a lot easier to add more water than it is to take it out, of course. Rather than lemon juice or water, you could use like an orange flavored liqueur like Cointreau. I need this because I don't like that noise. Okay, see, with 1 tablespoon of water, I think I'm going to go with that. It's running enough. I'm seeing it run off the spatula. I think I'm going to go with that. So 1 tablespoon rather than 2 of water. Next, what I want to do is I'm going to take a little bit of this out because I'm going to do an experiment. I'm actually going to take it into 2 bowls. My grandmother used some red and some green frosting. My mom always used white, so that's what I'm going to work with. But I want to experiment with food coloring and something else. I'll explain that when I get to it. So how we frosted the cookies is, this is actually a plastic palette knife for oil painting. I've never used it for oil painting. I just use it for frosting. Cover the cookie lightly with frosting. Not a lot of frosting on there. Try not to get it on your thumb like I just did. And then colored nonpareils, these little colored sprinkles like that. And that's what we would get. I'm going to show you a close-up of that. Okay, so there's the cookie. And that is a traditional Italian Christmas cookie. Let's talk about the experiment. I frosted all those cookies lightly. I should mention that if you like a lot of frosting on the cookies, if you like them really sweet, you may want to make extra frosting. I have some extra here that I haven't covered yet, and this is some of what I set aside earlier. Someone sent me this from Italy. This is called granella di zucchero, and I'm assuming that means grains of sugar. And what they look like is like grains of rice, but that's sugar. Okay? They put them on top of cakes in Italy. I told her I wanted to try to do this, use this on top of frosting on my Italian cookies. She didn't think it would work. She thought these might dissolve in and not stand out, but I'm going to experiment because I think it'll be worth it. So this is some of the frosting I set aside earlier. I have some red food coloring. I want to get a nice red color there. I may have to add some more powdered sugar to this because that's going to water that down. I got this where I want it, I think. So I'm going to smear that on there. That looks nice. And then I'm going to cover it with some of this sugar grains. And I'm thinking that should look pretty good. So there they are. My mom's sort of Italian Christmas cookies. The last step is to enjoy these, or at least some of them, as an afternoon snack, and then find some neighbors who want some Christmas cookies. All right. I know what they're going to taste like already because one broke in half when I was frosting it and I just put it in my mouth. But see, that's what I remember. My mom's Christmas cookies were just like that. Only mine will stay tender. Just sweet enough with that frosting. That's good. That brings back memories of childhood. Okay. Excuse me. I've got some neighbors to go visit. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit my website, mobilehomegourmet.com, and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.